Welcome to the Inner Lens, where we look inward, not to fix, but to understand. There is a reason many people avoid solitude. It is not the silence they fear, but what the silence reveals. Many people suffer not because they are alone, but because they are afraid of being alone. This fear quietly shapes their lives, their relationships, and ultimately, their sense of self. And in avoiding solitude, they often lose the very thing they are searching for: an authentic encounter with themselves. Human beings are social by nature. We are not built to endure extreme isolation without consequence. History reflects this understanding clearly. Practices such as solitary confinement and exile have existed for centuries, not as neutral punishments, but as psychological weapons. Prolonged isolation has long been known to erode mental stability, sometimes leading to despair, disintegration, or madness. Yet the modern fear of solitude is rarely about such extreme conditions. For most people today, the fear is far subtler. It appears as discomfort with silence, an inability to sit alone without stimulation, or a constant need to remain connected, distracted, or surrounded by others. Even brief periods of aloneness can provoke unease. This fear deserves closer examination, because its effects extend far beyond discomfort. It influences how people form relationships, how they relate to themselves, and whether they ever develop a stable inner identity. Many thinkers have suggested that the fear of solitude is, at its core, a fear of oneself. In daily life, filled with obligations, routines, and social interactions, individuals often operate through a carefully maintained social persona. This outward-facing self allows uncomfortable thoughts, unresolved emotions, and inner conflicts to remain buried beneath constant activity. But solitude removes these buffers. When one is no longer protected by noise, roles, or the presence of others, what has been suppressed begins to surface: unpleasant emotions, unexamined desires, and unresolved tensions demand attention. As Friedrich Nietzsche observed, what one brings into solitude is what grows there. This includes not only insight and creativity, but also what he referred to as the beast within. For this reason, extended solitude can become a heavy burden. If the inner material that emerges is overwhelming or unintegrated, solitude may feel less like refuge and more like punishment. Nietzsche believed that only a few individuals possess the strength to endure this confrontation and integrate what arises. For most, such an encounter would be destabilizing rather than transformative. This is why he warned against solitude for those unprepared to face themselves honestly. When solitude becomes unbearable, the most common response is to cling to others. Relationships are used not as spaces of mutual growth, but as shields against inner emptiness. Some seek others in order to find themselves, while others do so in order to escape themselves entirely. This dependency comes at a cost. When people rely on others to define their identity or provide constant validation, they often become diminished versions of who they could have been. Their growth is constrained by fear of abandonment, rejection, or disapproval. In order to actualize one's potential, something more is required. Abraham Maslow described this in terms of meta-needs, the highest human needs, including truth, beauty, and goodness. These needs cannot be fully satisfied through other people alone. As Ernest Becker argued, it is impossible to extract spiritual fulfillment entirely from interpersonal relationships. To expect another person to satisfy all of one's highest needs is to demand the impossible. When this happens, partners are unconsciously elevated into godlike figures, becoming the sole source of meaning, value, and self-worth. Such idealization inevitably leads to dependency, and where dependency exists, resentment soon follows. The partner who was once idealized can easily become the source of disappointment or perceived betrayal. Becker warned that when another person becomes the ultimate judge of one's worth, the individual gradually loses their autonomy. Their identity becomes a reflection of the other, much like a child who defines themselves solely through the family. In such relationships, Both submission and domination carry deep psychological costs. To avoid these dependency-driven dynamics, a different capacity must be developed. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott referred to this as the capacity to be alone. When individuals fear solitude, they often become overly compliant in relationships. They adapt themselves to perceived expectations, suppress authentic feelings, and construct what Winnicott called a false self. This false self functions socially, but it is disconnected from genuine needs and emotions. Paradoxically, it is through solitude that this false self begins to dissolve. When one is alone without distraction, the internal pressures that sustain inauthentic behavior weaken. Over time, this allows authentic feelings, values, and desires to re-emerge. In modern culture, however, the benefits of solitude are often overlooked. Many unconsciously adopt assumptions derived from object relations theory, which emphasizes interpersonal relationships as the primary source of psychological development and meaning. One influential proponent of this view was John Bowlby, who argued that intimate attachments form the central axis of a person's life, from infancy through old age. Taken to an extreme, this perspective implies that life has little or no meaning outside of relationships. What this overlooks is a well-established psychological reality. Meaning and maturation can also emerge through solitude, particularly when one cultivates a deep relationship with creative or intellectual work. The psychiatrist Anthony Storr argued that many individuals achieve integration and self-realization not primarily through social interaction, but through sustained engagement with work that absorbs their attention. In shaping external creations, they unknowingly impose order on their inner world. For such individuals, identity is formed through self-reference rather than constant feedback from others. The Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky went so far as to claim that solitude is as essential for the mind as food is for the body. Through solitude, character can be forged away from the often constricting demands of others. This allows individuals to maintain independence within relationships, rather than losing themselves in them. Yet solitude is not without danger. Nietzsche warned of its risks, and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe famously remarked that nothing is more dangerous than solitude. These warnings are not contradictions, but cautions. The dangers of solitude and its benefits are inseparable. It is precisely because solitude exposes inner darkness that it holds transformative potential. Only by voluntarily entering solitude and confronting what arises can one extract its benefits. As Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, solitude should not be feared simply because part of us wishes to escape it. Difficulty, he suggested, is not a sign to retreat, but a reason to remain. Solitude is difficult, and that difficulty is not incidental, it is essential. If this reflection resonates with you, this channel exists for that reason. The Inner Lens explores the quiet psychological patterns of adult life, not to give advice, but to understand. You are welcome to subscribe if you value slow, honest psychological reflection.